Putin has launched an ICBM at Dnipro, the Ukrainian city. But is there at least one key detail that makes this not the story that you think it is? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about this breaking story. So, Russia has reportedly launched an intercontinental ballistic missile against Ukraine, hitting in the city of Dnipro. There's two aspects of this that are significant. The first is that this is the first time, if true, that an intercontinental ballistic missile has been used in actual warfare, right? These were weapons that were designed to carry nuclear warheads. But critically, the other important detail is that this one did not. It carried conventional explosives. And so what makes it sort of strange is that, well, you know what ICBM stands for. Intercontinental ballistic missile. But Ukraine and Russia are on the same continent. So why then is Russia launching a intercontinental ballistic missile at a target that's actually relatively close, right? Here's the city of Dnipro right here. And you can see that it's very much on the same continent and not even all that far away from Moscow. In fact, Russia has lots of weapons in its arsenal that can hit these targets. But here's the thing. I'm going to point out another key detail. There's a lot of layers to this story, and we're going to sort of talk about the why here in a second. But first, if you want to check out the footage of this, I can't show it here on YouTube. Instead, what I have to do is put it on combatvetnews.com. This is my version of Patreon, where I have hundreds of exclusive videos, analysis that cover the war going back to the beginning. So if you're interested in basically one of the largest archives of combat footage and analysis, you want to become a member. This is also, of course, the best way to support the channel. You guys know that I'm entirely independent, entirely crowdfunded by you guys. So I depend on you to keep me able to do this every single day. And you guys know that our fans, you guys know that I was recently in Ukraine. And again, being able to do this stuff, get to the front lines and literally get the story from the ground is something that no other YouTuber is out here doing, other than a couple of YouTubers that actually are in the fighting. So again, your support is the thing that enables me and the team to continue to do this. So check it out. Link is in the description. And a new video is dropping today, by the way. Okay. So supposedly, this is according to OSINT Technical, Ukrainian Air Force is saying that the ICBM was actually MIRVed, right? And this is supposedly a picture of the MIRVed reentry vehicles. So what is MIRVed? MIRVed means multiple independent reentry vehicles. And these are, again, think of this as like a cluster bomb, right? You know how a cluster bomb goes up, it comes down, and it expands into a bunch of little bombs that all fall into the ground. Now, a cluster bomb, those bombs are dumb. They just open up and they all fall as like raindrops. A MIRVed ICBM has something a little different. Each one of those cluster bomblets can guide itself to a target, right? So think of it a little bit like a rocket ship carrying airplanes, right? Where a space shuttle, right? Space shuttle is flying down at a high speed, and eventually it reaches a certain altitude where airplanes can fly. And so then it opens up and releases its own individual bomblets that guide themselves to their designated targets. So in that way, it can be a more efficient way to deliver these sort of things on to deliver targets. But again, here's the thing to take away, guys. ICBMs, ballistic missiles, there's a couple of layers to this, okay? The first is that an ICBM is overkill, right? You can see a ballistic missile like this, right, enters the atmosphere and then comes down, right? It enters, it enters the high Earth atmosphere, the low Earth orbit almost. Right? It's almost into space when it comes back down. And it comes down with a really high velocity. So fast, in fact, that it's very hard for missile defenses to intercept them. This is in contrast from a cruise missile or a Shahed, which can be intercepted by systems like the Patriot. There really isn't a reliable way to intercept ballistic missile warheads. And again, that's the appeal of these MIRVed vehicles, is that they enter the sort of air defense altitudes at a supersonic speed. And then when they're below air defense altitude, they crack open and the MIRVs go to their individual targets. And so it can be effective, but it is so expensive, guys. I mean, again, what you're doing is taking a guided cluster bomb, something that's very expensive, a cruise missile, and you're strapping it onto a rocket ship. So this is something that only highly developed states like the United States, China, and Russia really have a demonstrated capacity to do. Other nuclear powers, a lot of them don't actually sport ICBMs. They have medium-range ballistic missiles. And so this is incredibly expensive and kind of phenomenal overkill in a way, given that, again, it would be more cost-effective to use cruise missiles. So why then is Russia chosen to do this? Well, there's a couple of reasons. The first is, again, we've talked about nuclear saber rattling, and this is a game that Russia plays. Remember, Russia has a direct red line phone from their Secretary of Defense to our Secretary of Defense, the United States. And when something really egregious has happened, right, or is in danger of happening, the Secretary of Defense of Russia picks up the phone and calls the U.S. Defense Secretary. He's done it twice already, where he said, listen, our intelligence says that you or the Ukrainians are going to do thing X. And they've never disclosed what thing X has been, but the Russians have called and said, if you do thing X, our response is going to have to be overwhelming, right? It's going to be a real escalation. And the fact that Russia is willing to do that to stop an escalation should tell you that the fact that they haven't done it means that other actions like this are performative, right? So this is a performative act. The goal is actually to create, I'm sort of serving Russian interests because I made a video with a headline that says ICBM hits Dnipro, right? But here's the thing. In terms of what happened to Dnipro, it is no different than being hit with 5 or 6 cruise missiles, right? Something that is a routine occurrence in Ukraine, right? Slightly harder to interdict, true, but highly cost ineffective. The idea is that it's going to create what's called self-deterrence in the West. The West and its citizens are going to give Putin what he wants because he is performatively escalating, right? Again, functionally, to the experience of citizens in Dnipro, it's cruise missile, ICBM, MIRV warheads, medium-range ballistic missile. They're all sort of the same. To an air defender, they're different, right? But the idea is that the West is going to become scared and it's going to intentionally withdraw support from the Ukrainians. And again, we can know that this is performative because we've seen how Russia responds to actual escalations, actual things that they say we are going to escalate if this happens. And the fact that they're doing something different should tell you right away that this is not part of this escalatory process, right? That this is a performance. And so that's part of it. The other part of it, though, is that Russia, because its military has been depleted quite heavily, right? Its conventional forces have been depleted quite heavily, particularly their high-tech conventional forces. In this conflict, they rely more, actually, on their nuclear deterrent to sort of check what they believe are threats from their enemies. And it's true, right? Like China, if Russia had zero military and zero aircraft, like China would just be like, yeah, of course. Why would we not take Russia? They can't defend themselves, right? And so you have this deterrent force is actually pretty important for Russia. And so the lower their conventional force goes, the more they need to make sure their enemies can see a nuclear deterrent. Well, here's the nice thing with using an ICBM. The nice thing is that they've just demonstrated, hey, we know Russian tech, it's hit or miss. But we are using this ICBM and publicly doing so against a massive civilian target where it will absolutely be filmed and acknowledged. And we're doing it to tell everyone else in the globe that, hey, our ICBMs don't miss. If we wanted to, we could use them. So don't think that because the Russian conventional military is being bogged down or diminished, that our nuclear abilities remain very, very high. And that's good strategic deterrence, is to make your deterrent force as credible as possible, right? Again, Putin has said himself that they are not going to use this to win in Ukraine. That is not what his nuclear deterrence policy says. His nuclear deterrence policy says threats to sovereignty, critical threats to territorial integrity. So if NATO forces were to drive into St. Petersburg and say, we are annexing this and we're going to make it the independent Republic of St. Petersburg, then yeah, the Russians would nuke us, right? If we were to, for example, throw nuclear weapons at Moscow, or even a massive fleet of conventional weapons to flatten Moscow and say, we're going to change the government, then yes, the Russians would say, yes, this is part of our nuclear doctrine to deter it. But as it stands, the nuclear doctrine has not changed. It's not going to be used to win in Ukraine. It's not going to be used to win any kind of war of choice for Russia. And the fact is that this ICBM, again, is a message. It's a signal. It's not really a fundamental shift in the Russian way of war or the Russian nuclear mindset. Anyway, guys, I hope you got some value out of that. Thanks to Bill Collier, Robert Colburn, Guyers, Marnie, Gina, Questa, Chris, Gorsuch, Francis Karis, L90, and Petra Taruru, as well as all of our lieutenant tier members. Make sure you submit for the Q&A this week if you're that lieutenant tier member and above, and I'll see you guys over there. Cheers.